الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على عبده ورسوله وأمينه على وحيه وخليله وصفوته من عباده نبينا وإمامنا وسيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سلك سبيله واهتدى بهداه إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. The new book that we're briefly going to cover in our daily short halaqat is Mujibat al-Istighfar by Sheikh Nasir al-Fahd, All-llahu Asra. Some brothers had planned to translate the book and they actually began the translation. They sent me the first portion to review, but shortly thereafter they vanished and I'm not sure what happened to them or to the translation. Whether it's translated or not, it's essential to go over such a book for many reasons. Mainly because it's an important topic and I don't think anyone addressed this detailed topic of istighfar like the Sheikh did. It also raises awareness about the author who is persecuted and oppressed, a alim who's unjustly held as a captive. And we purposely target the works of such ulama and proudly highlight their names to raise awareness so people can know them and make dua for them, and so they can raise awareness for them as well, so our ulama can get the ajr while they're behind the dark walls of prison, unlike those who are too timid and use the work of some ulama that are persecuted, omitting their names, and then they claim that they love them. Another point is, from the day that I met the Sheikh, so long as we were in contact or he found a way to contact me, he always made sure I was the first to get any book that he authored after he finalized it and completed it in order to publish it and circulate it. Prior to prison, I put his books on a site we had that was called the Salafiyun.com, which was one of the top 10 visited internet sites globally. And after prison, it was placed on my Twitter account. As to the author, we spoke about Sheikh Nasir al-Fahd in the past, and I don't like to repeat what we spoke about to save time, but it's good to reiterate it in this case because it raises awareness, and that's the least we can do to a Muslim who's going through oppression. Last time I spoke about him, I mentioned some of his prison conditions and some of the torture that he endures. I mentioned some of his shuyukh, and I stated that he memorized the 9 books of hadith and 20 essential books on various topics. And after that, it reached me that he memorized even more than the 20 books that I mentioned. I also said he authored 65 books in prison, and it reached me that it's well beyond 85 now and drastically growing. Allahumma barik lahu. Within this book that we're about to go over, inshallah, he refers to unpublished books that he wrote in prison. One of them, for example, is responding to ulama who consider it a sin for men to wear clothes below the ankle if it's for show off only, meaning they stipulate it's only prohibited if it's for show off. He responded to those ulama as he states. He also has another book he refers to that's unpublished and he wrote while he was in prison pertaining to a shirk al-khafi, which is hidden shirk like show off, and specifically he states that it pertains to show off as it pertains to students of knowledge and dua. It's extremely difficult to write in prison because of the conditions one is put in. Because there's physical and mental torture, one lacks peace of mind. In Sheikh Nasir's Fahd, in case sometimes they blast music near his cell as a method of torture. Sometimes the hard work in writing and pens and pencils are taken, so he may need to write with ink made of coffee and a straw, among other forms of hostility that they practice against captives. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserves high, lofty ranks near him in Jannah, for some of his awliya that he loves, but their deeds couldn't be sufficient to take them to those high levels. Allah may choose for his awliya trials and shahada in this dunya as means to attain those high ranks near him with the ceiling of their palaces, the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah that Sheikh Nasir be among those. And at the same time, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ease his hardship and suffering, and that he keeps him steadfast and firm as we know him. A major obstacle in writing in prison, above all that which I mentioned, is that you don't have the references that you need and you are in dire need of when writing books. They may allow some books, but a student of ilm needs a great vast variety of books when writing. Sheikh Nasr's wife, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honor her, circulated a picture of his vast library some time ago. Sometimes you look up a detail, or you want to do the simple task of researching the authenticity of a hadith, and that leads to a research in numerous volumes from different titles, especially when you're a mujtahid in such matters, and he is. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with a great memory to write so many books with so little, if any, references. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him barakah. His work greatly resembles the style of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and subhanallah, they both have in common that they wrote volumes from memory while they were both in prison. And I said something about Shaykh Nasr some time ago, which in reality I took it from Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid al-Shafi'i, when he said it about Ibn Taymiyyah, when he first met him. And I say it not only from my first-hand knowledge of matters pertaining to Shaykh Nasr, but his writings prove it, and more so his writings from prison. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Ibn Daqiq al-Eid said, when I met Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahumullah jami'ah, I met a man who had all the sciences of knowledge before his eyes, meaning everything was in his mind. He takes that which he wishes, and he leaves that which he wishes. His guards, Shaykh Nasr's guards, say that he sleeps only 4 hours and spends the rest of his day between ibadah, reading and writing. I personally find his writings extremely enchanting and very captivating. So captivating to me that I read most, if not all, of his books many times over and over. In fact, some of his books I've read more than 20 times. You escape with his books to the days of the Salaf and righteous ulama, the courageous ulama that we yearn for without leaving the comfort of our homes. When he writes on a topic, he masters it, may Allah increase him. And when he writes on contemporary issues or refutes, it's airtight, and he leaves his opponents no room to substantially respond or to breathe. He did so with Yusuf al-Qardawi when he was popular and his ideology was spreading. He responded to him numerous times until a character named Walid ibn Hadi, a retired judge from Qatar, he called out Shaykh Nasr for a debate in 1999. Walid ibn Hadi called the Shaykh out and he told him, what I'm going to do with you in the debate will make a child's hair turn gray. I remember that statement. And he said, bring your shroud with you and be ready, meaning I'm going to bury you alive. When Shaykh Nasr was preparing for the debate, he told me that the night before the scheduled debate, someone hacked his computer and erased all the information on it. But he still went through with the debate, and I witnessed it live, and it turned out by the will of Allah that Walid was the one who needed to bring the shroud. He also responded to Hassan Farhan al-Maliki, who transgressed against the principles of Tawheed and degraded the Sahaba. When a final date was set for a debate between them, after going back and forth for some time, Hassan Farhan al-Maliki turned his back in retreat without even looking back. Both al-Maliki, may Allah destroy him, and Shaykh Nasr, may Allah preserve him, are now both in prison. Shaykh Nasr stood for Tawheed and defended the Sahaba, while the others slandered the Sahaba and promoted shirk. Yet the deluded sites who claim to be from Ahl Sunnah, who claim to take on the task of raising awareness for prisoners in the Arabian Peninsula, they don't mention Shaykh Nasr. In fact, they haven't mentioned him not even once. Yet the one who promoted shirk and slandered the Sahaba is constantly mentioned by them, and they always raise awareness for him. They claim to be dissidents who want to bring justice to the Arabian Peninsula, but in reality them and the ones they want to topple are worse than each other when it comes to the true pure muwahideen. Shaykh Nasr also wrote a book responding to those who were against the demolition of the statues, and he left no room for a substantial rebuttal on that issue. And we translated that book back then into 6 different languages. He also responded to a group of scholars in a book he called At-Tankil in 3 different parts, which was directed at some so-called ulama who I was in close contact with. 2 of those who the book targeted, I had a very long history and a long relationship with them. One of them, my father, may Allah give him a long life full of deeds, invited him in 1987 to our house to give a da'wah tour in the States before their little prison stint that changed them and made them different men. Private letters I exchanged with them, advising them after their release, and then finally publishing the book by Sheikh Nasser that refuted them. That was the straw that broke the camel's back and the pardon of our ways, and alhamdulillah for that. And I'll maybe talk about it in detail in the future. If you want to get a glimpse on the depth of Sheikh Nasser's knowledge and how exhaustive his research is, look to his book, Siyanat Majmu' al-Fatawa, which is actually a printed book. He went through the 37-volume compilation of Fatawa Ibn Taymiyyah that took 40 years to compile. Then he went through all the other volumes of Ibn Taymiyyah's work that are not part of the Fatawa, and he pointed out to some errors or corrections that need to be made or omitted portions that he found. And he mentioned, for example, as I recall, 3 Fatawa attributed to Ibn Taymiyyah in Majmu' al-Fatawa that he doubts are actually written by Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. He commented on different fatwas that were mistakenly intertwined with each other, and other fatwas that had missing words and phrases and sentences and paragraphs. And he mentioned some fatwas that had a continuation outside Majmu' al-Fatawa, which were not included in Majmu' al-Fatawa collection. The original Majmu' al-Fatawa, the original one, is 37 volumes. They're separate works of Ibn Taymiyyah outside the Majmu', and it's tens of volumes on top of that. And in order to come up with such a research, not only did he have to read those volumes, but carefully analyze every single word in depth and detail. Sheikh Nasser was in prison from 95 to 99 for a poem he wrote, I believe. And I mentioned their calendar to avoid confusing you. Otherwise, we would use only the Hijri calendar that represents our identity and our history. So he was in prison from 1995 to 1999. That book was released after his release from the 3-year prison term. 4 years after his release, in 99, he was rearrested again in 2003, and he's been in prison since then. After 2003, it reached me that he read Fatawa Ibn Taymiyyah 6 more times and authored an 800-line poem, a matan, outlining Ibn Taymiyyah's principles in Usul al-Fiqh and his principles in Usul al-Tafsir. He has books responding to Murji'ah and Rafida and principles of Takfir and on the sciences of Hadith. He's a muhaddith in every sense of the word, and a alim in ilal al-hadith. Ilal al-hadith is referred to hidden, unapparent reasons where a hadith can be classified as weak, even though it may appear authentic. He even has a book on the lineage of his tribe, al-Asa'ida, which became a reference on that topic. The Sheikh's lineage goes back to Al-Asa'ida, the tribe of Halim al-Sa'diyah who nursed the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Al-Asa'ida are considered the maternal uncles of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam by way of nursing. The Sheikh compiled a book on the names of the families belonging to that tribe. And even though it's more of a lifeless topic, he actually pumped life into it and made it a very interesting read. We lost contact, me and him lost contact with each other for some time, and I later found out it was because he traveled to Medina from his hometown Riyadh when he heard there was an order to apprehend him, and later on he was apprehended in Medina, and not long after that I myself was taken to prison as well. There are a few letters or booklets released in intervals where we lost communication that were not sent to me, and I can't testify if they were his or not, because we can only bear witness and testify to what we are sure of, especially in matters like this. After I was released from prison, I was contacted by those who are in direct contact with him in prison, and he sent me a personal letter and a few of the books that he wrote in prison in order to publish and circulate them, and one of them is this book that we're going to go over, inshallah. He also responded to a question I asked him, which was to set a curriculum for students of ilm, which I plan to teach, inshallah. And he responded, Jazahullah khair, and I believe it's translated into English as well. When I used to call Sheikh Hamoud al-Uqla, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise his rank in Jannah, he constantly would express so much love for Sheikh Nasser. And I can't say for sure because Allah knows best, but I believe, because I contacted him to the very last days of his life, I believe that Sheikh Nasser was possibly his favorite student. And Allah knows best. In one of Sheikh Nasser's daring letters from prison, Sheikh Nasser said, contrive anything you may wish against me and give me no respite. Conspire against me without delay. If you have anything more than crucifixion and killing, then bring it on. وَلَسْتُ أُبَالِي حِينَ أُقْتَلُ مُسْلِمًا عَلَى أَيِّ جَنْبٍ كَانَ فِي اللَّهِ مَصْرَعِي. I don't care when I'm being killed as a Muslim, in which way I die for the sake of Allah. وَذَلِكَ فِي ذَاتِ الْإِلَهِ وَإِنْ يَشَأْ يُبَارِكْ عَلَى أَوْصَالِ شِلْوٍ مُمَزَّعِي. Because this is for Allah's sake. And if He wishes, He will bless my torn limbs and broken joints. When we take on the task of da'wah, especially during times like this, we already know our lives and freedom and honor are at stake. In fact, we would be astonished not to be treated with hostility. Sometimes it gets to the point where you need to enlighten the enemies that there's nothing they can do to harm you. And there's nothing that they can do that you don't expect, because we know our enemies. Sheikh Nasser mentioned in that same letter, the same quote Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned, what can my enemies do to me? My paradise is in my heart, it goes with me wherever I go. To imprison me is to provide me with seclusion. To send me into exile is to send me away in the path of Allah. And to kill me is to make me a martyr. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to delight our eyes with His release, because His specific condition and conditions like His melt every heart if that heart has any Islam and Iman in it.